Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to another episode of our weekly HE support series, DMU Talks. My name is Ben and this evening we are going to be talking about UCAS Extra. So hopefully you stick around over the next sort of 40 minutes as we talk through the whole UCAS process. If you do want to get in touch with us at any point during the stream, asking us questions, you can pop those into the YouTube comments and we will do our best to answer the questions that you have throughout the episode. I am going to be joined today by a team of experts who are going to be helping me out as we explore everything that UCAS has to offer. So I'm going to introduce you to them all now. First up, we have got Dal. Hello, Dal.
How you doing, Ben? You okay?
Yeah, I'm all good. I'm all good. I'm also going to introduce Henrik.
Evening, chaps.
There he is. There's Henrik. I've also got Nikila.
Hello.
Hello, Nikila. And finally, we have got Faye. So as we explore over this next hour or so, we are going to be talking, as I said, about UCAS and all those things that we're going to be sort of covering in terms of the UCAS process. So this is the next episode in a series of live streams where, as I say, we are going to be helping students through their sort of next steps in terms of going to university. Last week, we talked about why higher education, so why students might choose to actually go to university. And then this week, we're going to be talking a little bit about the process. So it's quite fact heavy, this episode, I feel, because we've got quite a lot of sort of ground to cover. So let's kick it off. We're going to go over to Faye, first of all, as we explore actually what UCAS is. So Faye, can you explain that for us?
Absolutely. So UCAS, to be honest, I am always forgetting what UCAS stands for. But in case you want to know, it's the Universities and College Admission Service. So what it is, it's a central hub for all undergraduate applications. There's lots of resources there for students, for parents even. Lots and lots of stuff there that's really, really important when you are doing your UCAS application. So UCAS is where you do your application, as I just mentioned. So if you're in the UK, you can't submit an application to a university without going through UCAS. So it's very, very important that you at least remember the letters of the word. As part of UCAS, you can find a portfolio of over 50,000 courses. I wonder if my colleagues managed to get through all the 50,000 courses. I don't think I did. I think usually you have a kind of an interest to have a look through, start doing a bit of a search. You might have a couple of courses that you have in mind, and you've got all your institutions on there. So all your universities that offer undergraduate programs in the UK. So that's just a bit of what UCAS is in a nutshell. Over to you, Ben.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Faye. So that's, again, looking at how UCAS kind of works, there is going to be a little bit of timeline and certain deadlines that you'll need to hit over the course of the next few months to make sure that you are getting all your information in correctly. So we're going to jump over to a timeline. And I think, Nikila, you're going to go through that timeline with us and just explain all those key deadlines that students need to hit.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. Yes. So I think one of the best pieces of advice I could possibly give with regards to UCAS is to note all of these important dates into your diary. It can be very overwhelming when you've got a lot of things going on with the UCAS application and obviously still studying at the same time. It can be very easy to miss certain deadlines, but it's really, really important that you just remember these key dates. So do just pop them into your calendars and diaries and just make sure that they are there. So first and foremost, the first date that you need to know about is the 8th of September, which is when UCAS opens for 2021 entry. Now, from the 19th of May, you are able to register for 2021. So you can start to get your application together, start to look at what the forms look like, start to fill in your details, just get a head start. The sooner the better you get started with these things, the easier it will be for you when you start to think about submitting. The next deadline that's important to remember is the 15th of October, which is the deadline for Oxbridge, so that's Cambridge and Oxford. And for those of you who are looking to apply for veterinary science, medicine and dentistry, so all of these courses have a little bit of an earlier deadline. They take a little bit longer to process in the universities. So if you're looking to get started with these types of courses, you will need to remember that you need to submit a little bit early, so it's best to get the ball rolling in terms of your application sooner rather than later. The next deadline to be aware of is the 15th of January, which is the deadline for everything else. So that will be when all of the applicants have to submit their university choices. And then you have a deadline of the 30th of June to make up to 5 choices on UCAS. So we'll go over this in a little bit more detail, but you do have an option to make up to 5 different choices for different universities or different courses in the same university. That is entirely up to yourself. And then by March 2021, you should start to receive all your offers back from your universities. And you will have up until then, from then onwards until May 2021 to make your final choice. So you'll decide your firm and your insurance choice. So the firm choice is the one that you definitely want to go to. The insurance choice is your backup choice. And then you'll have results day in August, where we go through a period known as confirmation and clearing. And then you should hopefully start in university in September 2021.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So those are your sort of key deadlines that you need to be sort of aware of over the next few months to make sure that you are ticking all the right boxes and getting yourself in a good position to go to university as sort of early as you can. Now, obviously, something we're going to come on to a little bit later is going to highlight stuff around results day. So if you do happen to sort of mess things up, or if you do decide to change your mind, there are going to be other options for you outside of this timeline that it's going to be aware of. So just in case you think of anything else, we can come to that very, very shortly. Also, again, if you do have any questions, do pop them into the comments. We'll do our best to answer them live whilst we're here. So yeah, do pop them into those as we sort of go. The next thing that we want to come on to here is going to be the actual application process itself. So as Faye rightly said a little bit earlier, the key part of the actual UCAS website is going to be when you make your application. So this is you jumping onto that UCAS website, that is you actually submitting your details and then making those applications. So Henrik, could you go through the actual full UCAS process with us?
Of course, can. Thank you, Ben. So as you said, there's just a couple of steps you have to go through to actually apply to university. So you can start off by making an account with UCAS. So you create an account, you have to pop in some of your details, and that will populate obviously a username and a password. Keep those safe because you will need those later down the line when it comes to checking the status of your application and checking the offers from the universities that you're applying to. You'll also be given a buzzword, and you'll need this to apply if you're applying through college. So you'll all apply through your school or college. So if you're applying through, say, your sixth form, that kind of thing, you'll have a buzzword. You'll all use the same buzzword. If you're applying independently, so if you're applying a little bit later as a mature learner, you won't necessarily have one of those. So don't worry about that too much. When it comes to actually applying, you'll be looking at up to 5 choices. Now, we recommend that you do go through all 5 choices. It's totally up to you as an applicant. If you want to apply for just one university, you can, but you might as well go for that 5, just in case things maybe don't quite go to plan with 1 or 2 choices. So if you've got those 5 choices there, you'll be able to make one of those a firm choice, and you'll be able to make one of those an insurance choice to have that backup. It is just worth noting as well that the same application is sent to all the universities. So if you apply for 5 different universities or 5 different courses, you don't apply with a different personal statement or a different application. So it is worth noting that you go right on cue. Yeah, so you send one application to all the universities. Just to cover some of the costs, it's £20 for a single choice, and it's £25 for all 5 choices. So from a cost standpoint, it does also make a little bit more sense just to apply for the 5 choices. Now, the actual statement itself, when it comes to popping down all your details, it's 6 sections, and they're pretty straightforward. So it's going to start with just obviously popping down all your personal details, your name, email address, ethnic origin, that kind of thing. And then you're going to look to pick your university choices. You don't have to put these in any sort of preference, but you'll be looking for your 5 choices. And then later down the line, you'll be looking at making one of these your firm choice and one of these your insurance choice. You'll then pop in your qualifications, any employment or work experience that you have, a reference. Now, typically this would be from your tutor at school or college. If you are a mature learner, it might be a reference from your workplace. And then you also have to write your personal statement, which I believe my colleague Dow will be mentioning in just a moment.
Perfect. Thank you very much. In fact, that leads us quite nicely into talking about personal statements. And I think this is the part that maybe worries the most students, because it's the part of the process, as Henrik said there, that's probably the most sort of lengthy in terms of what students need to do. I know that we're probably going to cover this in a bit more detail in a future episode. But Dal, should we have a quick discussion about what a personal statement is and why it is so important for those students when they're applying to university?
Yeah, sure, Ben. Without giving too much away for next week's episode, so next week's episode is all around personal statements. So I'm not going to give everything that we've got planned for that one. You'll have to tune in next week to find out more details. But very briefly, as an overview, your personal statement is something that we use to assess you in terms of your skills, your qualities, and your expertise, and really what differentiates you between yourself and other students that are applying to the course. And as Henrik said, you can only write once. When you're sending off your application, that same application goes to the university choices that you guys make. So say, for example, if you're applying for 2 courses that don't necessarily sit within the same field, you could potentially struggle when writing your personal statement, because how do you draw the similarities between the two? So our bit of advice to you guys is, when you're thinking about the course that you guys want to do, please, where possible, try and make sure they sit within the same sort of field, so you can draw upon the commonalities between the two. Otherwise, it can become quite difficult. It's an opportunity for you guys to sell yourself. So this can be quite tricky, because some students might feel like, oh my God, I'm being too big-headed, I'm being a bit boastful. But it genuinely is your opportunity to tell us why you are so great and what makes you such a fantastic student. Okay, so we want to know around your motives for studying the course. We also want to know around your about your knowledge that you have for the course. Okay, so it's very, very important that you portray the knowledge that you have. You show to us the skills and the qualities that you guys have developed and how they are transferable into the fields. We know this year it's going to be a bit more tricky in terms of getting employment experience or any type of work experience over the summer or over the next year or so, in preparation for your university starting in 2021. But the advice that we can give to you is look to see where you've developed those skills elsewhere. You can still look towards your education, you can still look to your social life in terms of developing those key skills and qualities, because they are all transferable. It's only 4,000 characters or 47 lines. Now, for some students, that might scare you and think, oh my God, how am I supposed to write everything and condense it down to 47 lines? Some of you might even be scratching your head thinking, I don't think I can write 47 lines. And the best bit of advice I can tell you all is to tune in next week.
That's a very nice tease for upcoming episodes. I think next week we've got it's actually research in university next week, so it's the week after that we're doing personal statements. I had to double check myself.
Oh, I do apologize there, Ben. I got the
no. I said exactly the same thing. So I know that next week we are going to be touching a little bit more onto research in university, and then the episode after that is going to be our personal statement session. But just whilst we're here, and before we move on to the kind of next steps of the application, we're going to be going over, I think, to Nikila, who's going to tell us a little bit about what sort of happens next. But before we jump over to that, what we've done there is we've highlighted the very key points of the first sort of early stages of those application processes. So all the way from you deciding what universities you're actually going to put on your application, so you can make those 5 choices, as Henrik has correctly said. You've got to submit that personal statement that Dallas just talked about. But just reflecting on that, and again, try not to give too much away, can you guys kind of cast your minds back and think about when you were making your UCAS applications and when you were finalising those details? What sort of things were going through your mind, and what were the kind of biggest hurdles that you came up across when it came to a UCAS application?
I would say definitely for me, the personal statement was the bit that I dreaded the very most. So I had no problem filling in the prior stuff. It was very simple. It's very easy to use. It's very much just what are your details, what qualifications do you have, GCSEs, what are your predicted grades, what subjects are you studying, that type of thing. Definitely the personal statement was the hardest bit. And I think back then more so than now, I was the type of person where if I dreaded something, I would be the best procrastinator in the world. And I would do everything around other than actually putting pen to paper. So my best tip, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, is a good old mind map. You can't go wrong. So put pen to paper, even if it's not necessarily writing the personal statement straight away. Sometimes by planning around it and thinking about what you could start to say, different areas that you want to talk about, before you know it, you can actually start writing. But I think definitely the hardest part is literally putting pen to paper.
Yeah. Dad, what about yourself? I mean, not just with the personal statement, just anything to do with the application. Casting your mind back, what were the sort of things that you came up across?
I think it was actually getting round to do it. So as Nikila said, because it is so simple, sometimes you often put it off and you think that, you know what, it's only going to take me an hour, it's only going to take me 40 minutes or however quick you guys work. I think for me, if it's not that thought-provoking, I don't usually tend to prioritize it. So I remember for me, when I was writing it, I weren't really too worried about the actual UCAS statement part and filling it out. I think for me, the only thing that I was concerned about was writing around the personal statement. And if now looking back in terms of hindsight, I probably would have done it the opposite way, get it out of the way first. So, you know, you've done, in my opinion, all the admin side to it, and then you can really focus and start to really think around the personal statement and what you're going to put in there. But yeah, and also chasing your academic staff for references. I don't know what your guys' experience of that was like, but for me, I know I had to ask my teacher to rewrite it because I weren't quite happy with what was put. So she showed me a draft of it, and I was just like, "Oh, can we change that a little bit?" Because I don't believe it was a fair reflection, but that's just me being very, very picky. So yeah, if you can, top tip, try and read the reference before they send it away, just to make sure that you're happy with it as well, and try and get it in early as well. So I know a lot of people will wait until, I know a lot of schools and colleges will work to a deadline in November or December, even though, as I think it was Nikila who said the deadline is in January, but obviously schools and colleges, they do work to their own deadline. So don't try and leave it last minute until you get your reference and everything finalized, because that also does play a big part of your application, because it does speak about the student you are and the student that we can accept when your application comes through.
Absolutely, that's a good one. Actually, I've not thought about checking over the references before, so that's a really good one to mention. Thank you, Dale. Faye, anything that you want to add on regards to that? Oh, microphone. It's okay. It's late in the evening.
That always happens at least once a week. I think for me, it was probably not even getting to the personal statement. I had to think about what I wanted to study. I was still kind of floating between different subjects. And I think writing the personal statement really helped me to start thinking, okay, what can I really talk about? Clearly I must enjoy this if I can talk more about this subject. So I kind of wrote different ones. And I think something that's really important is that even if you can't go to open days at the moment and thinking, how do I make these really big decisions, is get yourself booked onto virtual open days. Some universities like ourselves have virtual campus tours online as well. Lots of videos on there where you can meet students. You can get onto speaking to our students on UniBuddy through our website as well. We'll pop the notes in the comments, any of the links. But I think it's about doing all that kind of research beforehand, that you might think, well, what can I put in a statement? I don't know what I want to apply to. But you can start just thinking about some of the skills that you have, what you've learned from your current studies, or if you've had a job, what have you learned from that? And take it from there, really. I think start making not just a mind map of your personal statement, but a mind map of how you're going to go about your application, if you like to be, nice and organized.
Good. Yeah, that's a good one. And finally, Henrik, anything you want to jump in on there with regards to just generally the application process?
Yeah, I'd say similar to what Dal said. Don't rush it, because, I mean, speaking from experience, I rushed it myself. And then I think you'll find when you're in year 13, you've got so much going on. You maybe got some coursework, your open days, you're doing extra stuff. And you're just going to, you're going to end up doing it in the space of a few days. I remember a funny story with my friends, actually. I doubt he's watching this, but I won't name drop just in case. But he rushed his statement and he rushed his application, and he wanted to apply for graphic design, but he didn't realise he applied for garden design by. He didn't check his statement. So I don't know how he studied art, but he got. But he got offers, but then he had to withdraw his application and resend it.
We
Sorry.
should laugh, but you haven't told us that story before, and that one is funny.
By the way.
Yeah, that is a new one. That's a new one. Did he? I was going to ask, did he stick with garden design? But
He ended up doing graphic design, but just as a word of advice, just check all your stuff you clicked on and read through it.
yeah.
Spell checker doesn't pick up every mistake.
No, absolutely. That's a good one, actually. Something as well before I'm going to have to compose myself now. Something else as well, Henrik. You know, you and I were both in a position where we either changed university or actually changed courses kind of midway through. This is probably going to tie more into next week's episode where we talk a bit more about research. But going along those same sort of lines as making sure that you've picked the right course. Equally, you've got to make sure that you've actually done enough research and you're not just kind of jumping straight in with that. You know, you do get to make 5 choices, but we need to make sure that you've made that right sort of decision for you. That's also going to come down to not rushing it as well. I mean, what are your thoughts on that one as well, Henrik?
Yeah, 100%. I originally applied for a course that, to be honest, I didn't really have any actual interest in. I applied for law originally, and I think I was more hung up on the thought of studying law and the sort of employment opportunities that might come with it. So I don't want to like bash law. If anyone's watching this interested in law, it's obviously a fantastic course. It's really good, but you've got to be very like willing to put your head in the book. And I'm not that kind of person. So I just decided to swap to more of a business related course, which I think is a bit more me. So
yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a good. I don't know how you've been holding off on that story for so long, Henry. It's a good one. Okay, so moving on to the sort of next topics then. So we've kind of covered a lot of the UCAS side of things. We've talked very briefly about personal statements, and as I say, do check back with us in a couple of weeks because that's going to be for the personal statement episode. That's going to be absolutely fantastic. And as I say, Dow's got loads and loads of experience actually looking over personal statements, so his insight is going to be really useful when it comes to that episode. But once you've actually clicked that send button, once the application has been sent off to your 5 choices, what happens next? And I'm going to jump back over to Faye, who's going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so UCAS actually sends, that's not me.
There we go.
A good beard. UCAS sends a copy to all your chosen universities. So they do that on your behalf. Universities will then assess your application, and don't panic if one university gets back to you quicker than another, or if your friend here is back before you. You know, sometimes they just come in different. We look at pile maybe, you know, applications 1 to 50 first, and then we'll go on to the next ones. So universities generally have until about March to get back to you. Usually they don't wait that long, but just bear with us. So they assess your application. And it might be that you just get an answer from us and that's updated through UCAS Track. But it might be that there's something else that is part of your application that's required. So if you're doing something art and design related, for example, you might be requested to send in a portfolio. That could be a digital portfolio, or it could be bringing it onto campus, for example. Obviously, that will be dependent on the COVID situation as well. And the same with interviews. You may be invited to an interview as part of your course. You can find out if that is applicable before applying, so you know to be prepared, to talk about whatever you've mentioned in your personal statement. Again, that might be through something like Skype, for example. I didn't personally have an interview. I think Nikila did have an interview, so she can probably pass on a few tips to you. But yes, UCAS Track will be updated, so you can keep following along the progress of your application until you receive some offers.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Faye. In fact, going along those lines, because you mentioned interviews, can we go over to Nikila just to get 1 or 2 sort of interview tips?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's loads of advice I could give you. I'll just give you a bit of a walkthrough about what happened in my interview days. So the interview that I had, because I did a degree in optics, because it's a face-to-face, very interactive sort of career, we had to then have an interview, actually only for one of the universities, but we did have to have an interview for the course. So the day itself was split into half. So it was half of it was your interview, which was just an interview one-on-one. It wasn't like a panel or anything like that, because they don't want to intimidate you. They appreciate the fact that you're 18 and potentially have never had an interview before in your life. And then the rest of the day was very much them showing you around the campus, showing you the facilities. I think one of the things that I want to stress as well is that a lot of universities do that type of thing. So it is very much about them being sold on you, but also you being sold on them. So remember that as much as you're there to make a good impression, they're there to make a good impression on yourself as well. So it is a both way. It's not they're there to judge you and think the worst, which is what I originally thought. In terms of the interview itself, obviously dress very smartly, treat it as a business interview. Don't be wearing trainers or anything informal like that. The first impression is really, really important. As soon as you walk in, unfortunately, in the world we live in, people are going to look at you straight away. If you're wearing tracksuit bottoms and some trainers, then the guy next to you is wearing a suit. Unfortunately, the way that they judge you as soon as you walk in, the guy in the suit is going to look favourable regardless of what it is that you next say. I would say do some reading around the topic itself. So when they interview for courses, the majority of the reason that they interview for is to show that you have a real understanding of what the course actually involves. So for me, because I did a degree in optics, and luckily I knew a little bit of information about this, but they pulled out a model of the eye and they said, can you identify some structures for me? Then they pulled out a model of the brain and said, can you identify some structures for me? The first one I was prepared for slightly, the second one I didn't have a clue, but it was more just for them to see, could I give an answer on the spot? Could I think on my feet? Could I justify what I was saying? Was there logic behind what I was saying? And even though I didn't necessarily know everything, they did guide you through it. So it was very much like an interactive, not just them sitting there staring at you speaking. The other advice that I would give is whatever you do wear comfortable shoes, because myself, I made the big mistake of buying some brand new shoes for this interview, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to be really smart. My feet were cut to pieces. They were bleeding. I was literally limping the entire day. I limped into my interview room and it was mortifying. And I luckily had plasters, but I had tissues stuffed into the back of my shoes so that I could like not hobble, and it was just horrible. So girls in particular, whatever you do, wear some comfortable shoes, because you're probably going to be doing a lot of walking around campus.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Nicola, for your interview tips. I think that's really important. And the one about the shoes, I think, is a very key one for everyone to take advantage of for their interviews. I've just had a little note here to say that all interviews this year are going to be online as well. So that's hopefully going to make life a little bit easier. But for some of those face-to-face ones, I can see that being a bit of a challenge. So obviously, keep in touch with your university as you kind of move through the process. If they are online, obviously certain things will change. Obviously, with the interviews that we've done over the last summer, they've all been online. So we've been able to adapt to those and still be able to kind of get that really good feel for those students that are going through that interview process. But yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Nicola. I'm just going to quickly, before we move on to the next section, jump over to a question. We had a question come through in the comments, which says, if you decide to change courses midway through, do you have to change the course or that is similar to what you were studying? So is the course that you're kind of jumping over to, does it have to be similar? Henrik, I'm going to get your thoughts on this as well, but just from my own perspective, I did change to something that was similar. So it was in the same sort of department, which meant it was very easy for me to translate over because I'd done a lot of similar modules. So it was, in that case, very, very easy for me to change what course I was studying. Henrik, I imagine your story was slightly different, wasn't it?
Yeah, I changed universities and course. So I had to submit a complete new application through UCAS. And I couldn't carry, so I went from law to a business course. I couldn't carry over any of those credits or those modules either. So I think similar to what Ben was saying, you know, if you're studying marketing and business and you go into digital marketing, there might be a chance that you could potentially swap, or you can maybe even move in your second year. But I think if it's something completely unrelated and if it's a different institution, it might be a case of, you know, making a new application. But it's definitely something you should check with university and the course faculties, because there might be some room to do that there.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Henrik, while we've got you, do you want to talk us through receiving and making offers, or receiving offers and making decisions, at university when you received your applications back?
Of course. So I guess receiving offers and then making that decision it might be a little bit of a waiting game. So as Faye mentioned before, there might be a little bit of a wait. So, you know, you've sent your application off by sort of mid-January at the latest, and then it is just going to be a little bit of a waiting game, unfortunately. And then, you know, you're waiting for the university to get back to you. They will have to get back to you by sort of March, May time anyway. But some unis might get back to you the following day. Others might take a few more weeks. If you have got things like portfolios, interviews, auditions, that kind of thing, it might add a little bit of time to that as well. So just bear that in mind. But what you'll be looking for is an offer back from your university. So hopefully you'll get either a conditional offer or an unconditional offer. Now, a conditional offer is what it says. So it's, you know, the university's offered you a place on the course granted that you meet the conditions, and those conditions normally are that you meet a certain entry requirement to get onto that course. So it might say you have to get 3 Bs as your conditional offer, and if you hit those 3 Bs, you've then got a place on the course. Another thing that's getting a little bit more popular is unconditional offers, and that is also what it says, in the sense that a university's offered you a place, and there are no conditions to that course. So you have a place on that course irrespective of your grades. But we do want to emphasize and just reiterate that that doesn't mean, you know, you can coast your final year. So if you do get an unconditional offer, you need to work just as hard if you were to be looking for a conditional offer, just because, you know, when it comes to graduating, looking for jobs, that kind of thing, employers will be looking at your they'll be looking at your grades. So, you know, if you might have gone to university, but if you failed your A levels, it's gonna, you know, they're gonna ask you why in those interviews, and you're gonna have to, you know, come up with an answer. And then also alternative to that as well, you might either be unsuccessful, which hopefully you won't be, but that is just the case that, you know, you've applied for this course, maybe your predicted grades don't quite match what the university are looking for, or maybe you didn't quite perform well in an interview, or you didn't quite write the sort of type of personal statement they're looking for, or you might also be offered an alternative course offer. And this, just to give you an example, might be like, you know, you've applied for something like pharmacy, but the university think maybe you're better suited for like pharmaceutical and cosmetic science. So something that might be loosely related, something you might be interested in. You don't have to accept that offer, but the university are making that offer to you. And then when it comes to hearing back from universities, hopefully you get all 5 offers to make a decision on. One of those will be your firm choice. So you'll make that your firm choice. That's the university you want to go to the most. That's the course you want to study the most. And then you also have your insurance choice, which is a backup, just in case things maybe don't quite go to plan. But typically with your insurance choice, it tends to be somewhere you'd also be quite happy to go and study. Of course, you'd be quite happy to go and study as well. So it's not like the end of the world. And then you have a deadline of 19th of May to make those decisions. And then the university that you've essentially made your first choice will be in touch, and they'll start telling you about things like accommodation and maybe like scholarships and bursaries and all sorts of stuff on the side. But yeah, so that's kind of how that works.
Thank you very much for that, Henrik, for covering the offers. So again, we're looking way more into the future now. We're looking sort of after Christmas, once those universities have made those decisions. But this is, again, going through that whole sort of process, that whole cycle that Nicola was talking about from start to finish, letting you kind of know what is going on. And this, as I say, is this kind of decisions that you'll need to make once you start receiving those offers back from those universities. I did mention as well before that we were going to look at those alternative options for those students that maybe, as Henrik's just said, maybe didn't quite meet the grades for their required courses. It might be, for instance, that you've actually decided not to apply to university during that part of the cycle that Nicola was talking about on that timeline earlier, but you get a little bit further into the summer holidays and think, actually, do you know what? I do fancy going to university now. This is what I've decided I wanted to do. And there are options for those students. There is something called UCAS Extra, and I'm going to hand over to Nicola, who is again going to explain a little bit about what that process is.
Thank you. Yes. So I think for myself anyway, when I was applying to university, I had never heard of UCAS Extra. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it meant. So I think it's very important that you do have a bit of an understanding, just in case things perhaps don't work out as you thought they would. So what is UCAS Extra? So UCAS Extra is sort of an additional choice that you can make on UCAS. But in order to make this choice, you have to have been unsuccessful at all 5 of your choices. So for instance, you've applied for all 5 universities, you've heard back from all of them before March, and you've been unsuccessful in all of your places. Or if, for instance, you've applied for law and you're thinking, okay, I want to actually go for business studies, and all of the offers that you currently hold for law, or perhaps you want to apply for a new university that you've not applied for previously, then you can perhaps go into UCAS Extra and make your additional one choice. It's only one choice, so you can't make 5 new choices, it's just the one. And this opens at the end of February until July, before we enter a new period known as clearing. You can only use this, I can't stress this enough, if you've used all 5 of your choices. So for instance, if you've made 4 choices and you've been unsuccessful in all 4 choices, technically you still have that 1/5 choice left over, which confuses a lot of students, and they are able to then use that to apply for a new university. And if you're then unsuccessful at that one, then you could perhaps enter UCAS Extra. But until you've used all 5 choices, you're not eligible for UCAS Extra. You need to check with other universities before you enter yourself onto UCAS Extra. So for instance, if you see a course that you're interested in, perhaps with us, you would look through the website, make sure you meet the entry criteria, inquire with the university themselves directly, not through UCAS. And if they can make you an offer, you would then be able to add them as your extra choice on UCAS. Now, it's no additional cost. If you paid for your 5 choices, which is now £26, not 25, then you won't need to pay again. It's incorporated within the whole UCAS fee that you pay. And the one thing I do need to add, though, is that you can't change your personal statement. Now, some universities are a bit understanding that, for instance, if you completely change your mind on your course, you go from history to maths, for instance, your original personal statement for history will not at all be applicable for maths. Some universities, not all, so you need to discuss this with them, will allow you to submit a separate personal statement for them to pass on to the academic team for consideration. So if, for instance, you need to make a new personal statement, discuss this with them, because it will give you a bit of time to get this together, and you can submit this with your application, with your supporting documents, and they'll look at this for you. This isn't always the case, as I say, so you do need to check with the university. One thing might be worthwhile finding out is to find out why you have been unsuccessful. So if you can ask for feedback from the other universities that have declined you, for instance, it would be useful for you to know. If it's something that you can change, for instance, your personal statement isn't what they're looking for because you've not been specific enough about the course, or you've not shown a true understanding of the course, that's something that you can change. If it's something like your entry criteria just completely don't match up to what they're requiring, then that might be something that you need to think about, start to think about your other options. Are there any of the universities that perhaps will offer you slightly lower entry criteria, something like that, that you can change? Then you know then what you can do to make yourself more successful with your future choices.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Nikila. Something else as well, just that ties into that as well, is clearing. Something that you might come across around that time is something called clearing, which does happen a little bit before results day, which is our sort of final topic for this stream today. But clearing works very similar to UCAS Extra. It allows you to sort of make those additional options, pop those onto your application, and maybe get an offer to university a little bit later after the whole application process has closed. So again, not going to touch on that too much today, but it's just something else to be aware of alongside that UCAS Extra. So what I'm going to do now, again, for the final part of this episode, I'm going to chuck over to Dow, who's going to talk about results day, the big all-encompassing results day, what happens at the end of the whole process.
The big finale, Ben.
Absolutely.
I won't let you down, mate. Don't worry. So the results day itself. So this is obviously one of the biggest days of your academic career so far. You would have worked for 2 years over on your A-levels and your BTEC, working really hard in order to get the best possible results you guys have got. And it can also be a very nerve-wracking day. So universities really emphasize with students come results day, because we understand the pressure that you guys have placed yourself under. We understand the importance and the significance of this day in terms of you getting your places at university. One thing that we always say to our students is to be prepared for an early start. So universities, I know all of us and our colleagues, we were available on results day in August last month from very, very early. So you get the opportunity to speak to universities very, very early. So i.e. that was around 6, 7 o'clock in the morning if you wanted to. So you can get in touch. So the phone lines do open that early. UCAS track, though, is not available until later on in the day. So if you do want to check whether you've got your place confirmed at university via UCAS, that doesn't update until later, although the universities their phone lines will be open a lot earlier. Collecting your results from your school or college. So it depends on the method that your school and college use. I know this year a lot of schools were publishing their results online. In terms of fast forwarding a year now, we're not too sure how that's going to pan out, but your school and college will inform you on how they are giving those results to their students. So it's important that you do go and collect those. So one thing that we'll always say is avoid going on holiday, just in case that you were going or you was planning on going to a certain university, you received a conditional offer and something may not have gone so well, so you probably didn't meet the conditions of your offer, then what you're going to need to do is get in touch with the university, and that could be extremely difficult if you're not in the country. Please don't pass the burden on to a parent or a guardian to do. It's something that you guys need to take responsibility for, and from a university perspective, we would love to hear from the students. So should your results day not go to plan, please do not panic. As Ben was mentioning earlier, clearing is always there to give students that extra opportunity to gain a place on the course that they want to go on to. So the two main things that you'll be using results day for is confirmation. So confirmation's in its title. So you just want to confirm that your place is secured at that university. And you can do that by giving the university a call, and we will be able to let you know, right, congratulations, your place is secured, but we will not be able to disclose information in regards to your grades or etc. So that is why it's important that you collect your grades from your school or college. The second thing that you could possibly do on results day is adjustment. So adjustment is when you exceed your firm offer. So if your offer has been listed as BBB and you do a lot better than BBB, for example, then you have up to 5 calendar days to do some research and secure an alternative place without losing your original place at university. But please also consider accommodation options if you are moving away from home. So if you do better than what was predicted, if you do better than what was written on your conditional offer, then you always have the opportunity to move up a tariff, move up a band in terms of the course selection that you go on to do in September.
Sweet, thank you very much. So that's covered everything that we wanted to talk about this evening, about generally the sort of UCAS process in general. Is there anything else that we wanted to touch on? Anything else that we've missed today in the session? Anything that we've not sort of covered? Any other last bits anybody wants to chip in with? I think we've covered everything. All that sort of last minute advice that we could think of. So that was the UCAS process. We are obviously doing this series of episodes here live on YouTube, talking about all of the sort of UCAS processes, looking at everything from sort of YHE, personal statements, research in university. All those different topics are going to be covered here over the next sort of few weeks. So if you do want to tune into those, there is a link coming up in the comments just in just a few moments that will take you over to our website. That will allow you to book on to all of our future sessions. So some of the ones that Dan was mentioning earlier, that was going to be covering things like research in university or indeed personal statements. Those are going to be, if you are looking to go into university, they are going to be extremely useful sessions. As I say, Dan is an expert in personal statements, so we'll be able to give you all of that advice in that particular episode. But that is it for today. That is it for this evening. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Thank you very much to you guys for helping everybody out with lots of information about UCAS. And hopefully we'll see some of you along to our Research in University session next week. Thank you very much. See you later.
Bye.